Hello, welcome to Mike's Mets Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Pashota, and we're back. Had a long stretch of a vacation, but I'm glad to have returned, and what a return to come back to with the New York Mets. Everything's on fire. No one seems to be safe, and it feels like it's all about to crumble and fall apart. And amazingly, we're not even through May, and everyone at this point is absolutely terrified of what the Mets have created and what they have right now. And let's be honest, everything that they have right now is terrible. There's very few things to really hang your hat on. The Mets have gotten off to an incredibly sloppy start. There's really no way to sugarcoat it. They have a roster that has heavily underperformed. No more so than the Mets pitching staff, which looks woefully unprepared for everything that has come across. The top pitcher on the team has been arguably Kodai Senga, but that's not really saying much. Kodai Senga has not been terrific. His starts have been somewhat bumpy through his first six starts. He is 4-1 for 3.38 ERA, but he's rocking a 5.2 FIP. So, yeah, it's not really very good. We did get Justin Verlander back, and Verlander pitched a pretty solid game in his first outing. He only went 5 innings, but struck out 5. Ultimately got the loss because the Mets were not able to summon any offense against the Detroit Tigers. And that's really where you have to put your face at it right now. The Mets had a series with the Detroit Tigers, and this was not a critical series, but it was a series that the Mets should have won. The Detroit Tigers are not a good team. They are stumbling under 500, and before the Mets came into town, they looked to be a firm fourth place contender. They would ultimately be swept by the Tigers in pretty convincing fashion. There was really no chance for the Mets to even summon any type of real comeback against them. They were completely overwhelmed in that series. And everything just looks really lethargic right now with the team. The hot start that they got off to, coming off of that road trip in California, which seems like a lifetime ago, all the momentum has now shifted. They are really stumbling. Pete Alonso, who was off to a great start, has slowed down. He is now slumping. Starling Marte has gotten off to a horrendous start. Really, the start that no one really needed him to get off to, because Marte is an incredibly important player. But his performance, arguably the second worst on this team, and that's saying something because there's been some pretty bad performances, but no more so than Eduardo Escobar and Marcana. These are three veterans who are just not getting it done and are making a lot of money, and have combined for a really disgusting start. Eduardo Escobar has a 571 OPS. We all know about Escobar and how badly he started off his season. Has gotten off his starting to rate it a little bit, but really too little too late, especially with the way that Brett Beatty's been playing. And Brett Beatty, one of the few bright spots with the Mets, who's bagged 286 with a 791 OPS, and clearly has to be considered the primary starter for this team, you would think. Brandon Nimmo is continuing his strong stretch. He's not batting 350 anymore, but still is batting a strong 310. Really nowhere anyone expected him to. If he maintains his batting average around 300 for the remainder of the year, I'll be happy. And then we have Francisco Lindor, who has, after his nice solid start to the season, has also dwindled. He's now batting 217, and he can't have Lindor batting that low. It's really a rough process. Now, we've talked a lot about the offense just now, but arguably this has been the Mets' strongest unit, I'm going to say, because the pitching staff is an absolute dumpster fire. Right now, as I mentioned before, Kodai Senga, arguably the best starter on this team. And we got Justin Verlander back, but Tyler McGill has been, let's say mediocre is probably the best terminology for what his performance has been like. Max Scherzer has been horrendous. Is the worst start of Max Scherzer's career ever to a season. He is not striking out people. He is walking people at a much higher rate than he ever has. He's giving up home runs at a much higher rate. And the end result is a ERA of 5.56 with an FIP of 6.35. And that tells you that he is just not getting people out. And he has a velocity that has not seemingly woken up. His arm appears to be dead. You have to wonder if this might be Scherzer's last season, based on how badly he has gotten off to the start this year. And there's certainly going to be questions about Scherzer because of his age, but he had performed incredibly well the previous year, and even though he had not finished on the best of runs at the end of the year, he seemed like a pretty solid bet to be at least an average pitcher. He is not right now an average pitcher. He's actually a very bad pitcher for the Mets, and making what was it? That's right, $43 million. So it's not really a great fit for a team, and you have to wonder what exactly is Steve Cohen's mentality in all of this. And Cohen's kept it pretty tight-lipped about what he thinks the Mets have done, and thus far it is not. None of it's been good. And Cohen has to be thinking, what exactly am I paying for? Because I'm paying a record amount of money for a team that's 17 and 18 right now. And it is the first time the Mets have been under 500 in some time. You have to go back to last year when they lost the opening day. But that was the main issue for the Mets since then. They have managed to maintain a 500 record or higher. Yeah, so this has not been one of the better periods to be a Met fan. One positive thing, if you're going to look for some positive things, has been they are dealing with a incredibly damaged roster. Everybody has seemingly gotten hurt. They finally got Verlander back, but it's probably going to be a little while for Verlander to get back into the swing of things, and they have to start him off slow. So that was the reason, partially, for the 5-inning limit that he had in that game against the Tigers. So you can look at Verlander as, a bright spot going forward, and perhaps Kodai Senga can sort of settle down, and so maybe Max Scherzer settles down, and then eventually they're going to get back. Who knows when exactly, but they will eventually get Jose Quintana back, and that will be another bright spot for the pitching staff. There are certainly moves that can be made by the Mets, and you got to hope that Billy Epler is looking mighty hard at what options he can actually extract and make in terms of trades. The bullpen has been sort of a mixed bag. David Robertson has been terrific. He has stepped into a role that he was not intended to be in, and he has performed admirably well. Adam Ottavino, not quite as good. Robertson rocking a 0.63 ERA with a 2.10 FIP. Ottavino's numbers much worse, 3.75 ERA and a 4.44 FIP. Drew Smith, Drew Smith has actually pitched surprisingly well, much better than I would have really gathered. Walks have been an issue with Smith, but he is striking at people at a really good rate. That's kind of where everything starts to sort of slip off, because then you have guys like Steven Nogosek and Jeff Brigham who are pitching fairly well, but Tommy Hunter has been, unfortunately, the mop-up guy and has been getting lit up consistently. And this leads into the two biggest issues with the Mets pitching staff, which is that the starting rotation cannot get past the fifth inning consistently. They rarely get past fifth, even rarer into the sixth inning. So it's probably a situation that is leading to a lot of among other things, a very beleaguered bullpen. They are racking up pitch counts. No one can seem to find the strike zone, which leads us into our next issue. They are walking people, and insane rate by the Mets standards. Last year was excellent. And if we want to dive back into 2022, the Mets walk rate for the year. Actually, let's go into walks allowed for all of 2022. They had finished with 428 walks, which pushed them second in the league in walks allowed. So they were the team that allowed the second fewest walks in all of baseball last season. And it had a lot to do with the guys that they had on the mound. Jacob deGrom, Max Scherzer, who was pitching much better at the time, Chris Bassett, Carlos Carrasco. Everybody was being very efficient with their pitch counts. They were pitching very smart and had good strikeout rates. And it led it also into the bullpen, where you had guys like Diaz and others who were having great seasons and were keeping their walks low, and everything was kind of going really well. This year, the Mets have allowed the most walks in the National League. They are dead last. They have allowed a shocking amount of walks, 134. Now, this isn't the most in all of Major League Baseball. It is the third most allowed in all of Major League Baseball, so things aren't really that great. And you have to wonder where exactly Jeremy Hefner is in all of this. And it's a fair question, because Jeremy Hefner has got to look like the guy who's going to get the axe soonest of all of the Mets coaches, because it doesn't seem like it's going to be Buck Showalter. And it's probably not going to be Eric Chavez, because the Mets offense has been at least average at best, even under the worst circumstances. Their starting rotation and bullpen, a unit that they have invested a lot of money in, has pitched so poorly, and part of this is because they've had to use guys who were not prepared to step into their spots, guys like Joey Lucchesi, David Peterson, Tyler McGill, Jose Butto, a lot of guys who really should not have been seeing consistent starts so early on this season, but need to find their way into the rotation because the Mets were so beleaguered with injuries. So, assuming that we don't see these people much going forward, is the Mets' walk rate going to improve? Here's the thing. It's not going to improve unless the Mets' approach improves, and that is because they are throwing a shocking amount of pitches a lot of the time. They're going for balls. They can't seem to set. You have to wonder how much Jeremy Hefner was actually preparing everybody for the adjustment in terms of the increased pitch clock, which has been a problem. Some people have pointed out, a lot of pitchers who have had difficulty early on the year, that it's been an adjustment for them going forward in terms of how well they pitch and how they approach the game, because they're setting up and throwing faster than they're planning to, as they would have last year, for example. It's a convenient excuse. I don't necessarily buy it. However, there's a lot of data to support it that this is a situation where a lot of pitchers have not quite adapted yet, and we may see these, tough walk rates and high home run rates and everything just sort of coalesce into more of a mean that's a little bit more consistent with the last few years of pitching in the Major League Baseball. But it does seem like offense is up because of this, and unfortunately, the pitchers who have been most unprepared for all of it, or have been prepared but have not quite adapted yet, a lot of them happen to be on the Mets rotation and the Mets bullpen. So you're left with a unit that has really underperformed, is borderline unwatchable. It's really hard to watch people just throw balls and get into 3-2 counts and just keep walking people. And unfortunately, that is the MO of a lot of the pitchers on the Mets staff. It's just not fun to watch, and it's honestly just a really ugly period. I had the chance to watch the game yesterday, and I'll say I flat out declined because I was spending time with my parents, and my mom said, would you want to watch the Met game with your father? And I said, no. And me and my dad were both like, no, like we don't trust them. Like, the Mets had a slim lead at the time. As it turned out, everything went pretty quickly downhill. The Mets would ultimately lose that game, and Uh, and these are games that they should be winning. It's probably the most frustrating thing about everything that they've done. I mean, these aren't like high quality teams. The Mets' loss was, just another in a series of ugly performances by a Mets pitching staff that has looked increasingly inept. And you have to wonder if there should be even, in the situation that they are with these guys, because they were in a position to win. The Mets had an early lead, 3-1, going into that game. They quickly squandered it, and by the fifth inning, they had completely let the game get out of control, allowing 7 runs in that fifth inning. And there's really nothing to say other than, Joey Lucchesi had to be pulled early in that game. He had only gone through 4 innings before he got pulled. It went to Jimmy Akabonis and Tommy Hunter, the terrible duo, who really left the game completely out of hand before giving off to Jeff Brigham, and then Dominic Leone would also allow a couple more runs. And that was it. And this, again, is against the Colorado Rockies, a team that is, let's say, not really going to be involved in the postseason process. They are 14-21. They are in dead last in the NL West. How are the Mets getting blown out by the Colorado Rockies? They're not even in Coors Field. What the hell is happening? So I'm sure you can hear I'm certainly frustrated. I know Mets fans have got to be frustrated. We don't really handle bad performances really well, so you have to wonder what exactly is the result of everything. And part of it is you kind of just have to take it with things have to improve, right? That's what we have to kind of have faith in. And you have to have faith in Epler, a GM who I say is not a good GM. I think he's a very average at best GM, a guy whose main skill is just spending owners' money. His approach to building the roster seemed very flawed. There was certainly hope that everything was going to work out well if everyone stayed healthy, but surprise, not everyone stayed healthy early on, and the result is the Mets looking like a real tough group right now. They have to rebound. The good thing is that the National League is so across the board struggling that they are not really out of the picture of anything yet, other than a division race where they are now 7 games behind Atlanta and have now been pushed back into a tie for second place with the Miami Marlins. Despite all that, they're still in a good shape because, as I said, everybody is sort of hovering around 500 or under 500 right now, with the exception of the Atlanta Braves, the Pittsburgh Pirates, another team that's not going to be around too much longer, the Milwaukee Brewers, the Chicago Cubs, the Los Angeles Dodgers, Arizona Diamondbacks, and San Diego Padres. And none of these teams really have great records except for the Dodgers and Braves and the Pirates, who also have 20 wins, but we're not really counting the Pirates, really. So you have to look at the Braves and Dodgers probably going to be the top 2 teams in the NL this year. Unless something drastic happens to either one of those teams, you got to assume those are going to be the top 2 seeds going to the playoffs this year. And the Mets have to find their way into this postseason and hope that they can get a good run, because at the rate they're going right now, they're not going to be going very far. It's not good. I'm not going to lie. I feel like, as a Met fan, you've been sort of sold a bag of goods here, and then you don't really feel like they are performing well, but you have to kind of hope that it's going to get better, because that's really all you can kind of put your hopes on. The Mets' schedule is not particularly difficult going forward, and that's probably been one of the more annoying things, is that their schedule early on this year has not been particularly hard. They haven't had a lot of difficult series, with the exception of the one against the Atlanta Braves most recently, but other than that, they're coming into another series against the Washington Nationals. I'm sorry, not the Washington Nationals, the Cincinnati Reds, then the Washington Nationals, and then they have to deal with the Tampa Bay Rays and the Cleveland Indians, so you're going to have to run into some tougher competition. They need to take these series against the Reds and Nationals going forward, and it's going to be hard because they're going to be on the road again before returning home to face the Raisin Indians. I keep saying Indians, the Cleveland Guardians. So we have a situation where it has not been improving. They need to improve. This next series against Cincinnati is so critical for them to sort of get off on the right foot. The Mets fortunately have an off day today, so we have to look at tomorrow. And it looks okay for the Mets in terms of the pitching matchup, I'll say. They do have Max Scherzer pitching in that game. You hope Scherzer's looking better. That's really all we can say in terms of what's going to be going forward for the Mets. Hope for better times, and not great, but I'll take it as far as I can with as much of a grain of salt as I can for now. Other than that, maybe just have to say it's been rough to watch. I don't really like watching what I've seen so far, and if they don't improve, it's going to be an ugly season. So let's hope that this next series against the Cincinnati Reds is one step forward without hopefully taking too many steps backward. Thank you for listening to the Mike's Mets podcast. Please be sure to follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Finally, please also follow the podcast Twitter, which is Mike's Mets Pod, all one word. Appreciate your time and have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. Let's go, Mets.